Helping people out on the streets, the challenge in keeping tabs on the health and well-being of homeless people in San Diego.
The border wall is absolutely against the core foundational values of the United States.
As President Trump looks to get funding to build the wall, a local artist is using the prototypes for a different type of art. We'll show you how they became a canvas for protest.
Despite the fact that it's designed for amphibious assault transporting Marines, it is actually very uniquely suited to the NASA mission.
Ready to blast off, the testing off the coast of San Diego that could help the next mission to the moon. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. President Trump may have a new path to citizenship for the so-called dreamers. Senior White House officials have offered a preview of his immigration framework today. One of the goals is to help 800,000 immigrants who relied on the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Trump's plan would dramatically scale back family-based migration, limiting it to spouses and underage children. The plan eliminates the visa lottery program. It also calls for $25 billion for a border wall, plus unspecified billions more for additional immigration enforcement measures. Governor Jerry Brown pushed forward with today's State of the State address. He used today's speech to remind everyone about what's changed since his first term in office.
Back in my first term, a prestigious report told us that California had the worst business climate in America. In point of fact, personal income in 1975, my first year as governor, was $154 billion. Today, it has grown to $2.4 trillion. In just the last 8 years alone, California's personal income has grown $845 billion, and 2.8 million new jobs have been created. Very few places in the world can match that record.
This was the governor's 16th and final State of the State address. He celebrated California's economic and environmental progress, and he continued to sound the alarm about the dangers of climate change.
Despite what is widely believed by some of the most powerful people in Washington, the science of climate change is not in doubt. The National Academies of Science of every major country in the world, including Russia and China, have all endorsed the mainstream view that human-caused greenhouse gases are trapping heat in the oceans and in the atmosphere, and that action must be taken to avert catastrophic changes in our weather systems. All nations agree except one, and that is solely because of one man, our current president.
Last year, Brown focused on immigration reform. The topic was absent from today's address. He also didn't explain how he would spend money from the state's cap and trade program. Volunteers will be on the streets tomorrow morning for San Diego County's annual homeless count. But one stat we already know, homeless deaths recorded by the medical examiner's office are on the rise. iNews Source reporter Leonardo Castaneda has more.
The San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office investigates the deaths of homeless people who died prematurely or on the streets without medical attention. In 2017, that number hit 126, almost double the number from 4 years ago. The number one cause of death was drug overdoses. The second was blunt force trauma injuries. Deputy Medical Examiner Stephen Campman says those usually involve a motor vehicle accident.
If there's a way to reach out to the homeless population to be careful, or to reach out to the cities that manage the traffic crossings, or however else we can try to increase the safety for homeless people, that would be great.
But the harder deaths for the medical examiner to account for are the homeless people who get sick because they lack access to health care. Bob McElroy with the nonprofit Alpha Project is trying to help the homeless who face life-threatening illnesses.
People are in survival mode out there, and They just don't have access to the medical care they do when they're inside as opposed to outside.
That includes people like Darlene Carmack. She has bronchitis and is staying in the Alpha Project's shelter in the East Village, where she's able to get access to medical treatments.
This wonderful place gets us back and forth to the emergency ward and brings us back home. Otherwise, we'd all be pushing up daisies.
With medicine and a temporary shelter to live in, Carmack says she hopes to be feeling better in a few weeks. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Leonardo Castañeda.
iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. County health officials say students and staff may have been exposed to tuberculosis at 2 San Diego area high schools. They found one diagnosed case at Crawford High, another at Steel Canyon High in Spring Valley. County health officials are offering free TB testing on both campuses. The agency reported more than 230 cases in San Diego County last year. UC nurses rallied in San Diego and across the state today demanding a new contract. They called this an informational picket outside Thornton Hospital in La Jolla. Union leaders are in the middle of contract talks with the UC system. Union members say they want changes with scheduling, retirement benefits, and overtime policies. A UC San Diego health spokeswoman says every one of its hospitals meets or exceeds the state's required nurse-to-patient staffing ratios. There's a new effort from Sacramento to stop wrongful convictions. Lawmakers say misidentification remains a major problem. A new measure proposes tougher standards for victim identification statements, like recording the entire ID process and taking statements from the witness on how confident they are in the identification. Lawmakers say the changes are necessary and long overdue.
We have a significant number of people who are through eyewitness identification sent to jail, and then years later through DNA or other means are exonerated, and they've now spent 10, 20, maybe 50 years in prison for a crime they didn't commit based on a bad eyewitness identification. We're never going to eliminate the risk of misidentification by eyewitnesses, but we need to do everything we can to reduce the risk.
In more than half the cases in California where DNA evidence has overturned a conviction against someone wrongfully accused, the conviction was found to be based on eyewitness testimony that misidentified the person accused. They're digging into a brand new bike trail in Bay Park. 2, 3. This is the beginning of the Rose Creek Bikeway. The 2-mile path will protect bikers and walkers from cars zipping through the area. The bikeway is part of the Coastal Rail Trail. The 44-mile route connects Oceanside to the Santa Fe Depot in downtown San Diego.
Lived in this community for 20 years, and my children grew up bike riding with me, and we have been wanting to see this for years. Unfortunately, they're now teenagers, but families of the future will really have a nice bike path.
Councilwoman Lori Zapp says the 2 miles of new bike path will cost more than $20 million and take a couple of years to build. The Rose Creek portion of the Coastal Rail Trail will connect the communities of Mission Bay, Mount Soledad, and La Jolla, while helping cyclists avoid Interstate 5. You might want to bring a jacket if you're headed out tonight. Cooler weather is sticking around, but is expected to warm up again by this weekend. Erin Calandra has details in tonight's forecast.
Hopefully you had a nice day today. Burr, I'm sure you have noticed it's a bit chillier out there today than it was yesterday. A cold front moved through. Very spotty activity as far as precipitation. Really, most people stayed dry, but maybe some really light drizzle in some areas. To the north of us, well, here is more wet weather. It's going to stay to the north of us, but temperatures are going to remain on the cool side for another day or so. So for tonight, 50 degrees, partly cloudy conditions, and across the county, well, along the coast, you should expect to see more clouds, inland fewer. Ramona 36, Poway 43, Chula Vista 48, and Alpine 37 degrees tonight. Now Friday, it's going to be a dry day, but still a bit cooler because of that cold front. Really not much happening though. Temperatures in San Diego at 64, Oceanside 65, and Poway 71. Mount Laguna down to 49 degrees. Here's our futurecast. This is Thursday, 4 o'clock in the morning, and look at Fresno. We're going to get a lot of snow through the Sierras tonight. More than a foot is expected. So tricky travel conditions if you are heading to the north. We certainly are expecting some problems as far north, really as far north as Washington State. We're going to see lots of weather happening there. For this weekend, it's going to get warmer. And when I say warmer, I mean record challenging temperatures on Sunday and on Monday. So the temperature on Sunday, 84, that's the high on record. We're going to get to 81 and right around 81 degrees for Monday. So we are certainly going to be challenging that. It is going to get nice and warm out here. Lots of sunshine. Inland, again, very warm. Look at Monday, nearly 90 degrees. Lots of sunshine, just gorgeous conditions here, kind of like summer. In the mountains, of course, it's going to be a bit cooler. Our lows in the 30s on Friday and Saturday, but jumping up to those low 60s by the work week. And in the deserts, in the 70s, and then eventually reaching those 80s. It's going to be nice. Overnight lows in the 40s and in the 50s. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Ebony, back to you.
The border between the U.S. and Mexico has attracted artists from across the world. A French photographer created a billboard-sized image of a little boy peeking over the fence in East County. A Mexican muralist has been painting the barriers for a year now. KPBS Frontiers reporter Jean Guerrero spoke to the latest artist to use the wall for a creative project.
My name is Jill Holzlin, and I'm a visual artist, and I live here in Tijuana. This neighborhood is called Las Torres. It's a neighborhood on the eastern edge of Tijuana, and these neighborhoods were established in the 1990s basically as a result of the free trade agreements and the free trade zones. This is the original border wall that was built as part of Operation Gatekeeper in 1994. Beyond this wall are the prototypes that were built in October. These are the prototypes that were Trump's project to prototype the new border wall that he hopes to build when or if he gets funding. We decided to do a projection, a light graffiti projection onto the walls. What we did was we projected messages that that reflect the values of the United States from this side of the border into the United States. We did it from this side of the border for a couple of reasons. For a practical reason, you can't literally get into the area near the prototypes unless you have a special tour with Border Patrol. One of the things that the United States stands for is freedom of expression and freedom of critique. And in this project, they've made it very, very difficult for people to have a voice. The discourse about immigration and the discourse about migration for most of the 20th century was that America was a great melting pot, or that America has this, diverse fabric of diversity that adds to the richness of our country. And that discourse has been distorted and has been taken over by anti-immigrant forces right now in the Trump administration. And to me, these walls are the perfect metaphor for the kind of emptiness of his administration and the emptiness of his rhetoric. They're big, gigantic walls that are kind of empty. They don't really, they're not effective. They don't really do the work that they claim to be able to do. And so now there's just a sort of provisional pile of tires here that someone has piled up, and people use this. They climb up on the tires and they jump across, and it's not very hard to do. The border wall is absolutely against the core foundational values of the United States. The core foundational values of the United States have been built upon immigration, upon welcoming refugees, upon creating a society that's very diverse. This was technically a protest. It's a protest against the border wall, but it was also more a matter of affirming and taking these messages and affirming the values that America ostensibly should stand for, and kind of pointing out that, well, maybe this administration is not affirming the values that America is founded on.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, I speak with Olympic gold medalist Shannon Miller about the way forward for future women gymnasts. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
In Detroit, people are waging a battle against what some call fugitive dust. There are a host of health issues because of airborne chemicals like sulfur dioxide. As reporter Christy McDonald explains, there's a balancing act between the output of industry and the health of the people who live around it.
Back in 2013, across the river in Canada, an environmental group called Windsor on Watch were watching big black piles grow along the Detroit shoreline.
We first got wind of it when a lady that lived in one of the apartment buildings on the riverfront saw this black dust on her balcony. But when we saw these piles, we knew exactly what that was on this woman's balcony.
The Canadians had started to complain, but it took a really big gust of wind to make it an international incident.
I noticed off to my side a black cloud coming down the river. So I formed my camera that way, and I think you can hear me on the video. It goes, "Is that the pet coke?"
It was like somebody took charcoal and just wiped out the skyline of the city of Detroit.
It almost was like a ghost floating across the river.
The wind shifted, and that cloud actually came down downtown Windsor here. Oh my God.
That video really started putting this issue on the map.
In southwest Detroit, down near the Ambassador Bridge, piles of industrial materials are nothing new, but the black mounds were. It was petroleum coke, or pet coke, another concern for a part of town facing health issues because of air pollution.
Growing up in Southwest, where I live and have grown up my whole life, you do get used to the industry, but at the same time, it's never felt right. It always feels wrong. Like, why is this allowable, and is this really the reality that we have to live in?
Pet coke. It's a byproduct of processed tar sands oil that comes from oil refineries. It's shipped overseas, where it's burned like coal.
I could see how much dust is moving up the conveyor belts and dumping into the freighter.
Detroiter Stephen Boyle documented the pet coke from the roof of a nearby apartment building. Meanwhile, Rashida Tlaib, then a state representative from Detroit, did her own investigation and gathered some samples.
It took us independently fighting on our own without city or state help to get these tested, to actually show, like, we're not crazy, this is toxic and we need to do something about it.
The test found toxins, including vanadium, selenium, even arsenic. By summer of 2013, Mayor Dave Bing got involved, and the piles were gone. The source of the pet coke is the Marathon Petroleum Refinery in the most southern part of the city of Detroit, an area called 48217. It's also called the most polluted zip code in Michigan.
My husband's on a CPAP machine. Yeah, that his breathing is completely off, and the doctor said it's what his environment and what he's inhaling.
It's what I use every day.
Robert and Jacqueline Smith live a few blocks from the refinery, where people have higher rates of asthma than the rest of the state. Here, some residents knew what pet coke was long before the piles appeared because they were worried how it could affect them.
Well, back when they announced that and told us the new process, and that they were going to start processing dirty tar sand oil, which they call sour oil, the question was asked, what is going to happen to the byproduct, which is pet coke? And they told us they were going to sell it.
The trucks would actually pull up to that. They'd be filled up through the chute inside the building, and they'd drive out, and then they'd take off down the road to where they're going to dump off the pet coke.
We asked way back then, how are you going to protect the community from any fugitive dust and fumes? And that's when we were told they were going to tarp it, hose their trucks down before they came through the community.
Now, Teresa Landrum is satisfied with Marathon's fugitive dust plan for pet coke. It's held in an enclosure, not like what happened on the river in 2013, which was not Marathon's problem. But with more bulk storage facilities around the city, there are a lot more piles of other stuff which can go airborne.
So if dust is blowing off these piles onto the river, that's contamination.
Rhonda Anderson of the Sierra Club is on Jefferson Avenue in Delray, another part of Southwest, just north of 48217.
Looks like it coming off a ship to me. And that, if that's the case, where is it coming from? And look at all this dust that's on the street from the trucks. That's not healthy. And I think I can taste it.
All this led Detroit City Council member Raquel Castaneda-Lopez to action. She started working on a fugitive dust ordinance when she first took office. It passed 4 years later, in the fall of 2017. The Michigan Aggregates Association is one of many groups that opposed it.
This is precedent setting. While there may be some localities that have permits on, one of the issues was pet coke, that is one that certainly is out there, but on sand and gravel for construction projects, this is by far the first one in the nation. It is unprecedented on that.
The ordinance requires pet coke, or coke-like materials, kept in enclosures. But for other materials, no enclosure is required, but a fugitive dust plan needs to be in place along with air monitors. Those against the ordinance say most of those things are already required by other government agencies.
As far as our daily operations, there really is not going to be that much of a difference. However, the paperwork and the administrative burden is going to be more of a concern to us.
Needham says he's still working with the city on details of the ordinance as it takes effect and hopes it won't hurt business, which has been good. The construction boom needs aggregates. For Castaneda-Lopez, she's looked at other cities around the country and in Europe that found ways industry and people can coexist in a healthier environment. She wants Detroit to move in that direction.
I think it's a first step in the city is kind of changing the trajectory from solely relying on heavy industry to support our local economy and really towards diversifying the local economy. Because if we want to attract families to the city, if we want to make this a thriving city, and people are coming and feeling sick or being impacted by the type of industry, it's just not going to work out.
That was Christy McDonald reporting from Detroit Public TV. You can read more about how the Motor City finds political will for cleaner air online at dptv.org. Artificial intelligence could solve the world's social problems, or at least that's the message from AI experts at a state capitol hearing. Today's hearing by the Little Hoover Commission looked at the role AI may play in California's future. The commission is an independent state oversight agency. Experts say many people fear that AI will eventually result in the loss of jobs in California. But AI experts say the technology can actually help spread information in a much more efficient way than traditional methods.
We really think that there's the potential to use new AI technologies to try to combat really difficult social problems like homelessness and HIV prevention or suicide prevention, for veterans. I mean, these are issues that are really difficult for social scientists and for social work researchers to tackle, and we need new solutions, and AI provides us with new tools to look at new solutions.
USC and UC Berkeley recently opened new centers devoted to studying the ways in which AI can help humanity. As for the fear of machines overthrowing humans, experts say that scenario is nowhere in our near future. NASA is wrapping up testing with the Navy off San Diego's coast. Today, they were practicing recovering an unmanned capsule that's going into space next year. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more from Naval Base San Diego.
This is a replica of the Orion capsule that will be orbiting the moon next year. For the last week, NASA and the U.S. Navy have been training on board USS Anchorage recovering it.
We got about 18 runs, and typically we get one a day. So we got twice as many this just on this test than we've ever gotten.
Thursday, NASA and the Navy gathered to discuss the recent testing, which they've been practicing since 2014.
NASA has design standards, and our hardware has to meet those design standards.
Melissa Jones is overseeing the capsule's recovery testing for NASA.
This capsule has attach points on it. We have a winch line that gets attached, and we have 4 lines that go out from the wing walls and get attached to the capsule, and then we reel it back in. Involves 6 small boats that we use. We use Zodiacs and we use ribs.
The Navy's USS Anchorage has a special compartment to help recover the capsule.
Despite the fact that it's designed for amphibious assault transporting Marines, it is actually very uniquely suited to the NASA mission.
During recoveries, the capsule is pulled into the ship where crew members work to secure it.
It's a significant effort as far as the Tech Department and NASA. We probably have total, probably maybe about 120 people involved, both in the boats as well as in the well deck.
The actual Orion capsule is set to orbit the moon sometime next December before touching down about 60 miles off San Diego's coast. NASA says they still have 3 more recovery tests before then.
We've learned a couple of small things that we will change, different pressures that allow us to have more control, but ultimately the system that we're testing right now is going to be the system that we use.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Torrey Pines is getting a lot of attention this week as Tiger Woods launches a comeback. Woods hasn't competed in a PGA event since last year's Farmers Insurance Open at Torrey Pines. Since then, he had his 4th back surgery. Torrey Pines has been good to Tiger Woods. He won the Farmers Open 7 times in his career. He also won his last major, the 2008 U.S. Open, on the same course. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.